Cockrathy community, what's up? We're back here on the Cockrathy podcast. Did I jump the gun? Were you about to do it, Ryan?
I was, but that's okay.
You were geared up already. I took the air out of you. Yeah, my bad.
You're good. Send it.
I lost train of thought. We're back here on the Cockrathy podcast. Coach Ryan and myself. Tyler is not joining us. He is at a camp right now getting ready for the games. So we're here. We're going to talk about some shit. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but Ryan's going to lead the charge.
Yeah. I figured today we just get into it. None of the normal fluff and banter that you have either come to love or hate. Probably fast forward.
You think so? I bet you people only listen to us because of the fluff and banter.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. Well, I'm sorry that we're detracting from that this week.
No fluffers today.
No fluffer. That's really what Tyler's for. So he is team fluffer.
How do you get that job? Now we're fluffing. See how I just said that?
Now we're really fluffing.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're the up and comer, that's just, it's kind of like that apprentice role. You gotta put in the work. You gotta put in the hours to get to the main stage. Like it's like the prelims, right? Like we look at the fights. Sometimes you gotta just pay your dues and, take one for the team, literally.
Man, do you think that's the industry standard when you're fluffing?
I mean, I would think so. Like, you're not going to take your stallion and be like, hey, you gotta waste all this energy
fluffing
doing that. Yeah.
But you're going to take someone that's like, they're 50-50. All right, they're going to start as a fluffer.
Yeah. That's, man. People probably look back at that part of their life and they're like, man,
I was a fluffer.
That was a low point.
Yeah. Or they just love it.
Maybe. Not a role for me. We'll put that one right out there.
I mean, the fluffer could be considered like the person behind the person. Like, you're the one that gets things going.
It's true. I mean,
you're the steamboat.
Yeah.
You're the engine. You're the
and
all
the other
gas, no
person's
brakes.
just batting. They're just batting cleanup.
Literally, you're loading the bases. And you're like, okay, I done my job. I got the runners on. Time for you to go score some.
Yeah.
All right, no more fluffing.
Good. Okay. All right. So what I thought we could talk about today is a topic that annoys the shit out of me, quite frankly. And that's just the state of energy systems training in the sport, right? I kind of touched on it a little bit before we hopped on, this ever moving target of, is zone 2 necessary? Do we just need to focus on high intensity? Are athletes wasting valuable training time, sitting on a bike, sitting on a machine and just getting those reps in, getting those calories in a low intensity state? Or is it just clickbait bullshit of people saying that it's not worthwhile? Because I also think that is part of the problem of what we've seen, So, yeah, what does Jason Leiden think? I know he's team zone 2, but what do you really think about it?
I'm team what the person needs, because I feel like this. So yes, I think too much stuff is clickbait. I think too many things are gimmicks that people try to say, or fads, or try to take hard stances in the sand in order to get people to truly connect with them. Like, yes, I knew this is what I think too. And then they jump on that train, or someone be like, this person's an idiot, but then they still click on their stuff and figure out what's going on. I think too much stuff is clickbait, because the real answer is it fucking depends. Like, I remember when high intensity first really started like clicking away in the endurance community, and you have people saying like, you don't need to do long slow distance, you only need to do high intensity. And a couple people get on board. They're like, oh, see, this person's, a 2.5 hour marathon runner, and this is what they're saying. And well, yeah, because they just spent 30 fucking years doing long slow distance to build an enormous VO2 max and aerobic base. So yes, for that person, they might not have to do zone 2, because their VO2 max and aerobic threshold and everything is so substantial that they can hang out in that middle area, which is still going to give them touches of VO2 max and aerobic threshold and aerobic capacity work, because that's already there for them. They don't need it, right? But you take someone that has zero aerobic base and you say all you need is high intensity, and like they're gonna fucking die. Like, hey, we're just gonna do 400-meter repeats and 800-meter repeats, and you're gonna run a marathon. That person won't make it past 12 miles unless it's pure grit and will, and then they won't be able to walk for a month afterwards because their joints are destroyed, right? So I'm pro meeting the athlete where they are and what do they need to be successful, right? Because most of the people, yes, they do need a lot of zone 2 work, and that's to build the base. As we go into extensive detail about this, but you need it for recovery, you need it for base, you need it to raise your ceiling, you need it to create the foundation, you need it for fatigue management, you need it for health and longevity. So if you don't have it, then you have to do it. But if you have that, okay, well, then you can hang out with more intensity work to drive that adaptation. But you can't sit there every single day because that's going to create so much metabolic stress. Your body's going to be constant fatigue and won't be able to recover from it, right? And then all of a sudden your hormones are fucked up and you're overreaching. And if you have poor nutrition and terrible sleep and high stress, well, now you're overtrained and now you're screwed for a long amount of time, right? So there is no hard stance with it. It has to be this, it has to be that. It's where's the athlete? What do they need to be successful? And then how do I structure this so they can recover and drive adaptation? And that may look a little bit different for everybody, but the principles around how to implement stuff is still going to be the same. You look at people that are pro threshold and VO2 max, and they really know what the fuck they're talking about. They're not hitting their people. They're not having their people hit that stuff every single day. When I say pro threshold VO2 max and know what to do, I'm talking about like, you look at endurance coaches who have done this for years and years and years and years and years, right? If people are hitting lots and lots of intensity every single day, it's a good indication they're on drugs, right? It's like if someone's maxing out every single fucking day of a lift and they're still getting better and better and better, there's a good indication they're on performance enhancements, right?
Yeah.
As proven. Your body can't do that. So I think that's what people got to start thinking for themselves and start looking at the bigger picture of this stuff. Because fuck, go on Claude or ChatGPT, be like, man, what are they talking about? What does this mean? Okay, well, how do you properly implement this? And you'd be like, oh, this person is an idiot because they're saying something completely different, right? I mean, I don't know. That's my ramble. But
No.
Go ahead.
No, where I think a lot of people go wrong is they think the only option for mixed training is intensity, right? Like, because that's all they see. And they haven't pulled the veil back yet of there's a balance between, we'll call it like strict structured zone 2 work, where maybe it's more monostructural, and then creating a transition to intensity in a mixed modal setting, right? So you're talking about, undulating intensity, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, and allowing for that adaptive recovery curve to take place, right? You can't adapt if you're just hitting intensity all day, every day. And it doesn't matter if you're, a high neurological demand one day and then a high metabolic demand. Like, the nervous system isn't going to realistically know the difference between the two of those. Like, yes, you're utilizing some different systems within that, but you're still creating a ton of stress. So even if you are, alternating that, and if you're alternating those two things every day, you're still creating a huge nervous system demand. And if the nervous system isn't adapting and the nervous system is fatigued, you're realistically not going to adapt to any training. You're just going to work closer to that state of burnout. So how do you like to walk that bridge, right? Your early season, maybe you're focusing on like max strength, you're doing some zone 2 stuff, shoring up kind of the foundational aspects of the athlete. And then you start getting into mid-season. You start looking at like pre-competition phases, things like that, where we're not full-blown sport yet, but we know maybe we're using some sort of, phase potentiated block periodization from a conditioning standpoint. And now we're like, hey, I need to start working in the sport. How do you tend to approach that? Because I know how I approach it, but I want to know how you approach it.
Man, how much time do we have? 10 minutes? I don't know. So it really depends upon that person. So let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, we're taking just a neutral base
intermediate.
athlete.
Let's paint the picture. Say intermediate athlete, right? Someone who's, like RX bubble, not the elites.
Okay. So one thing that a lot of people talk about is this person needs to like hurt better. This person has to learn how to suffer better. And it's almost like, when you're trying to drift a car, you got to turn left to go right. And I've never drifted a car, by the way. I actually just knew that because I watched the Pixar movie Cars the other day.
Hell yeah.
And Lightning McQueen. But my point is creating a huge aerobic base, aerobic capacity, increasing your VO2, increasing your ceiling. That gives them the framework to hurt better. That's what people don't quite grasp onto yet, right? That gives them the ability to continually elevate outputs while the heart rate doesn't jump too high and the systems don't shift over too quickly, where now they're just kind of like pulling at straws and their body's not able to recover and produce. And then they're just smoked and exhausted in the simplest, lamest terms way I could put it for the sake of the show. So coming into this athlete, what I'm going to generally look at when we keep it just towards energy system framework is I'm going to take this beginning part of the year and I'm going to put a good amount of time building that aerobic base. And a framework that a lot of people talk about is the 80-20 rule, right? And that's something that you, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with at the beginning stages for people. Where if you look at the total volume of work someone's doing for that week, from a conditioning standpoint, 80% of that is going to be closer to that zone 2, low zone 3 effort work. Now, there could be, you don't have to stay exactly in 80, but it gives you a framework for how to build it in the reference point. So anywhere from 10, 5, maybe 20% is going to be mixed between VO2 max work and threshold work. That allows for a couple things. It allows for fatigue management if you're focusing on strength and power or hypertrophy style work. It allows for metabolic rest coming off an intense session, and it also allows for better understanding of volume pacing and building the proper systems that you need within inside that aerobic capacity, that aerobic threshold. And then as that continually builds, which takes time, and I'm not saying you can sit there for 8 weeks or 12 weeks and you're going to magically build a huge aerobic base doing zone 2 work, it's going to take a lot of time. Or some people might have to sit there a lot longer. And that's what's really hard when you look at cross-style programming or a year-long program or 6 months, because for some people, it might take a year, it might take 6 months, depending upon their history and their previous exposure to sport and their previous exposure to just movement and exercise and where they spent time and God-given gifts and genetics. Some people might take 2 years. It might take 3 years. Like, it takes fucking time to build these huge wells, these huge basements that people need to continually elevate that ceiling that they have, that we want to create. But for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to sit there for a good amount of time while I'm focusing on other high skill, high neurologically driven training parameters. Then as that neurological driven focus might shift to more building capacity like strength, power, endurance, skill, and fatigue, and their neurological stress may shift a bit, not different, just a bit. Now I'm going to start for taking that energy system component and I might start shifting those percentages and tailoring more intensity work, more threshold work. And that might run, depending upon the person, I might do some sort of like block periodization where I'm running specific focus on threshold for a couple weeks and VO2 max for 3 weeks, all coupled with aerobic zone 2 work surrounding that. I might shift to more of a linear style. Who knows what kind of style I'm going to shift to, but it depends on the person. But the bottom line is the percentages are going to shift with the intensity that I'm going to put on for the focus. And I might sit there for a couple weeks and come back out of it and then revamp back up into it at higher intensities, higher volume within inside those intensities. And as I get closer to a competition prep, I'm going to shift into volumes in the drop and the intensity is going to come up just to give more competition style work. Now, that's like a 50,000 foot view that might cover the span of a year, or each block might cover the span of 2-3 months, depending on the person, the time we have, and how well they're adapting. But that's a general framework of what I'm thinking about with people.
The biggest thing I want people to take away from that is you're not building volume during intensity, right? So a big thing for coaches to understand is when you're in an intensity phase, you're really looking at volume, either sustainment or efficiency of volume, right? So, right, that volume intensity relationship that has an inverse relationship, I also lean on the side. I think I take a little bit different approach. I actually like to blow the sport out into different aspects. And maybe you do it this way too. But especially early season, I want to create the least amount of interference possible. This whole sport is built around interference. So in the off season, when I'm looking at more like GPP style phases or looking at limiters or like whatever you want to call it, I try to blow the sport out into sections. So I want to create the most optimal environment to create some sort of endurance or, aerobic adaptation that I possibly can. So I'm singularly focused, like those sessions are just focused on that, trying to pull whatever interference I can from the session before or what it may create after the fact. And so along with that, I'll be like, okay, I know I need to start looking at like tissue quality or tissue durability or tissue resilience, like whatever you want to
Mhm.
call that. And that comes through movement efficiency and movement quality. So instead of doing, EMOMs where maybe I'm riding a bike and then, doing pull-ups and squats and things like that, which I think there's value in that, just not in the early season phases. I'm doing EMOMs of what singular movements. And the parameter is not about the volume, it's about the efficiency and the movement quality aspect, right? So we build both a, aerobic ceiling and a sport specific volume ceiling, but we haven't combined those two things, right? And that to me is one of the more efficient ways. Although the training session may take a little bit longer, it creates less interference when you start looking at like movement pairings. How am I pairing things together? What am I doing the day before? What am I doing after? Taking into account compounding fatigue and the total fatigue of the week. If we started doing more of that with our athletes, I think we'd actually improve a lot of their longevity instead of trying to jam all of these things into one piece, right? Like you see, a lot of people throwing EMOMs together, 40-minute EMOMs, 60-minute EMOMs and things like that. I just don't see how that makes sense in early season. That to me is
Yeah.
like a bridge. It is essentially kind of more of like a bridge piece to the competitive season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, especially if we're keeping it around the athlete that we're referencing in this topic, right? I think some athletes who have been in the game for a super long time, have like super efficient skill wise and move really fucking well. I think they lay a canvas that can allow for things like that to be put in if they're able to sustain the desired, request of the coach or the request of the program, the request of the workout,
Yeah.
where it's not really interfering with them because the way the rep count and the movements are put into play, there's not really a ton of interference. It's more, for those people, it might be just more, various dynamic contractions, low effort, low heart rate, just kind of like movement quality type stuff. But I think for the type of athlete that we're talking about here, yeah, to me, that doesn't play a role because at that length of time, with a bunch of different movements and skill sets and dynamic contractions that are coming to play, they're going to be all over the place from a system standpoint and a fatigue standpoint and an interference effect as well. Well, it's not going to really have any desired set focus on what it's working on. Right, to me, like with this conversation, it brings me back to the early days of CrossFit, which they're like, when people are trying to get better at ring muscle ups, they're like, oh, you just got to do more ring muscle ups, like do them tired, do them this, do them that, do them that. And it's like, I would hear that and I'd be like, do you really think that that's the fucking answer? Like,
Yeah.
you're taking someone that can do 2 ring muscle ups and he's like, oh, you just got to do more ring muscle ups. And be like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. I'm like, that makes zero fucking sense. like you have to look, there's so many other things that go into their ability to be able to do 5, 7, 10, 15 ring muscle ups. And nowadays people are finally at the point where they're like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like you need, structural strength, you need stability, you need positional strength, you need core strength, endurance through all the different components, isometric strength, eccentric, concentric strength through the different ranges itself, pulling strength, pushing strength, whatever. Like you have all these different components and you get there, then that creates this baseline or this basement that now went from like this small box into this longer rectangle piece of which now it gave you the potentiation to do more. And then you do more tired and more fatigued. Then you keep increasing that rectangular base of the breadth of the depth of it to create a higher ceiling. And when we look at about energy system work, it's the same thing. Well, some people still get wrapped up in the eyewash of the selling of stuff. It's like, oh, you want to hurt better in CrossFit, you just got to hurt more. Like to me, like that saying is the same saying, oh, you want to get better in muscle ups, you got to do ring muscle ups. It's like, no, you don't need to just hurt more. You have to build that base. You have to create the depth of the width of that to increase the ceiling. And you got to do that with what's going to be the most effective way to do that for that person. And there's no exact method of like, hey, this way is going to always work. But we know what the principles are to build that basement and what that looks like. And that basement is that aerobic area, that zone 2, zone 3 style work. And the bigger and broader we get that, now that increases that breadth and depth for threshold work, for intensity work, and for max effort work, right? And then it gives the ability to recover from it. And it gives you the ability to continually enhance and build upon that from phase to phase and year to year to continually make that bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what people need to grasp. Like it's not just, oh, just hurt more to hurt more. It's like, no, you have to build a system that can support the discomfort,
Yeah.
and then that can recover from it. And then that's going to allow them to quote unquote hurt more.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the fitter the athlete is, I think they actually have to learn how to hurt less, right? Which is like a challenging thing where if you're really really fit and you have a huge aerobic base, zone 2 can actually be pretty fatiguing. Like how long, like your ability to just sustain that, and you may have to dial it back even more. So if you're utilizing some sort of like high low method, your low method may actually be really really low.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like I don't think enough athletes take that into account. And one thing I think to wrap that all, kind of put a bow on this is, where do athletes, with the current data that's out there, or what's, popular from a description of intensity, where do people go wrong in the prescription of zone 2 from, like from like a coach to athlete perspective, right? Because it's
Whew.
like conversational, nasal, you can say a couple sentences, or, like the kind of those like buzz terms. Does that act like, I don't, from the data that I've seen, clearly that it doesn't work, right? It's too broad, and more times than not, athletes overshoot.
All the time, right? So where do we go wrong? I think it's just the person's attraction to hurting, right? The person's attraction to feeling like they worked hard. And I think that creates this internal subsidiary desire to push when they shouldn't be.
So you think it's an athlete problem?
I mean, yeah, if the coach is doing what you just explained of like explaining how the workout should be, like if you're like, hey, I want you to hold this pace and every round should be in this range, or you should be able to hold a conversation. Like, however, coach, if you're going to put explanation to it and describe it with how it should be, but the person doesn't adhere to it, then that's the athlete problem. If the coach isn't doing that and they're like, okay, you're going to push this at 75, 80%, then that's a coach problem, because that's such a broad, like, you tell me to push 80%, like I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get out of breath, but I'm going to be able to
Yeah, it's
fucking,
going to sting a little bit.
yeah, right. So I think then it becomes a coach problem, not understanding how to describe it or really what they're looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a problem on both ends. I think coaches overutilize the common buzz terms without
Mhm.
actually looking, then not coming back to the heart rate data and actually looking at what's happening inside. Because I've had a bunch of athletes that I'm like, hey, we're going to do this at a nasal breathing pace, and they're pushing like 150 heart rate wise, right? So it's like that in itself is a flawed system. So I'm going to wrap this up quick because I know we only got a couple minutes, but I think there's a testing flaw within zone 2 training within our sport specifically. I think when you start expanding outside the more like endurance biased sports, runner, any sort of like real endurance sport, they clearly have the systems in place. But we've gotten into a place where we treat this at such a simplistic level, and we're like, just go ride the bike at an easy thing. We're really missing the mark, and that's where zone 2 becomes inconsequential, where they're either not moving hard enough, or they're moving too hard and completely blowing past it. So if you're a coach that, really wants to understand zone 2, especially in like a remote setting, there's things you have to start looking into, like cardiac drift tests, and how are you objectively looking at heart rate data? Because I do think that is the only metric, despite what some people are saying of heart rate data being useless. If you are going to do zone 2 training, that's the metric we need to realistically be looking at, and the response and change to pace. And are we actually pushing the top of zone 2,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is another podcast in and of
Yeah.
itself.
That's another podcast. That's another like gripe of mine. Like, nothing's really useless. Like, yeah, granted, I get it, but
Totally.
heart rate's useless. Like, it's not useless. Like, people who say stuff like that, I'm like, stop trying to like be fucking Instagram tough guy. Like,
Yeah,
it's not useless. Yeah.
totally. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what we talk about in the mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think what prompted this, I saw a couple ads on Instagram of people throwing around big buzzwords, but clearly having no idea what the fuck they're talking about. So I figured that was an easy topic we could kind of dive into. But if this is something you're interested in, learning more about how to critically and strategically prescribe energy systems training. That is a massive component within the mentorship. The next cohort is launching July 8th. So a couple spots left if you want to hop into that. But really, if you want to start thinking strategically, thinking logically, and learn how to adapt training to what the athlete's presenting in front of you, there is no better mentorship out there. And we will get you to speed to coach high-level athletes and the everyday person.
Love it. All right, guys. See you on the next show.